Welcome to the Property Investor Playbook. I'm Lara.
And I'm Daniel. We're going to show you step by step how you can grow your wealth. So Lara, we've got a special guest today, George.
We do. George from Blue Rock. Yes.
Yeah, Blue Rock, big accounting firm down in Melbourne.
Yes.
George specializes in the self-managed super fund space, the compliance around it. Talk about a bit of the trends that's happening at the moment, why people are opening up self-managed super funds.
Yeah.
So it might be a bit interesting.
Definitely. I learnt a lot today. I'm definitely not an expert in SMSF, and I found out some really good tax benefits.
Yep.
And I guess different ways that you can use property investment for wealth building for your future, which is really nice. I actually did some research before our podcast today that I wanted to share. So there are $3,852 billion in assets in traditional super funds as of March this year, compared to only $932 billion in SMSFs.
That's crazy, huh?
Yes.
It's crazy.
The crazier number was when you look at the median average for each person in a super fund or an SMSF. So the median assets per traditional super fund is $61,000. That stat is a little bit older as of 2021, but so is the next one. The most recent data from the ATO, which came out in 2021, the median asset per SMSF member is $472,000.
Oh.
So
Interesting.
61,000 median in traditional super versus 472,000 in SMSF. So it's definitely an underestimated tool, I think, for property investors, because even in that 60 grand to 400 and something.
Yeah, I guess the more knowledge you know, it's interesting what's out there. Hey, so there's so much techniques that you can use. So let's deep dive. Let's uncover it.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's get into it.
Hi, Daniel.
Lara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Another day in paradise.
Nice to have you on, George.
Hi guys, how you going?
We're good. We're good. Where are you virtually coming to us from today?
I'm coming from our offices at the Rialto on Collins Street in Melbourne.
Nice. Nice.
I like Melbourne.
Yeah, me too. We've had a few conversations actually about the property market in Melbourne recently. So
I just don't like him in rugby league. Just keep winning. Just stop.
All right, we might jump into, we have a fast 5 questions. So we give you around 30 seconds to answer them and we'll see how we go.
Sure.
Perfect. You got your timer ready, Daniel?
Give me a sec. My clock. All right. Lara, when you're ready, set, wiggle.
All right. What's your name and age?
I'm George Caravias and I'm 43 years old.
How many properties do you own?
2. What's
your biggest property regret?
Probably spending a bit of money on an older property that I purchased in the past to renovate, overcapitalized.
Okay. What's one thing about yourself that you've never told anyone?
Oh God. That's a hard one. I think I tell everyone everything, especially my wife. Maybe that I secretly eat Nutella out of a jar at night when no one's watching.
I love that. What's your most embarrassing moment? Or maybe it's the same.
Getting caught, maybe?
Very good, very good. How long were we, Daniel?
47 seconds.
Very nice. I do love a good Nutella straight out of the jar. I purposely have to not buy it so that it's not in my house so that I don't eat it.
Doesn't help when you've got one with your name on it.
Fair enough, fair enough. You said you've got 2 properties, was it?
Yes.
Nice. Can you tell us about how long you've had them or where they are or anything?
They're in Airport West in Melbourne, probably for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
Nice. What kind of made you buy property? Like, what was the reason why you personally wanted to buy a property?
I guess it was watching others buy property, and as we've gone through a good boom in the last couple of 10 years. I guess it was watching others buy property, and as we've gone through a good boom in the last couple of 10 years, it's a solid asset. Obviously, I can see it. So one that made me go towards property is that it's something I can physically see, and everyone perceptions of what they want to invest in. But I'm more of the person that likes to be able to see something rather than have it, I guess, in the stock market where I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations on the podcast so far where everybody kind of says something very similar around it's a physical asset, it's tangible, and it's one of the safest as well. So it's definitely a good one.
Yeah, look, and I think you said it right. Like everyone who bought in the last 10 years has experienced a boom. So if you ask anyone who's bought a property, they're gonna say that it's a positive story, like you said, George. So I guess the main reason why I want to do this, and I guess we want to do this, we want to tell people and investors how you can purchase a property and how it's not as daunting as you may think it is. There are ways that can make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
As long as you got your network around you. I think you're pretty good if you got the right support network around
you. Definitely. And there's so many different ways these days as well to get into property, and we're here to talk about one of them today. Can you tell us a bit about your background so far, your professional background?
So I've been working for 18 years. I'm a chartered accountant. I specialize in SMSF, so self-managed super fund administration and compliance. So over the journey, I've worked at multiple firms. About 7 years ago, I joined the firm that I'm at now called Blue Rock to build their SMSF service. So over that time, being able to help people with either set up an SMSF, seeing them go through the journey of buying property, or investing in shares, doing all different types of things that an SMSF allows you to do. And I guess the service that we provide here is to make sure that they're always compliant, because self-managed super fund is highly regulated.
Yeah.
Make sure that the clients are guided along the path, whether they need advice on investments, on say the compliance with the SMSF, as well as making sure that the fund gets audited every year without any issues.
Then let's start, I guess, and go straight into SMSF. How would somebody go about setting up their own self-managed super fund?
Sure, there's a few options that they've got here. One is there's people that are, sophisticated investors, and they know what they're doing, and they'll go set an SMS up through their accountant. Or the other pathway to this is actually to speak with a financial advisor to determine if an SMSF is the right option for you and does it fit in with your retirement strategy.
Yeah. Okay, nice. What would you say would be, I guess, the key documentation that people need to get ready in order to give you or their accountant to kind of kick off this process?
Well, essentially establishing an SMSF is quite easy. There's a form that we would provide the client. They've all their details, so their personal details, what they want to call the SMSF. If they're borrowing, they'll be required to set up a limited recourse borrowing structure. And so they'd fill in those details as well. We would then prepare the documents from our legal team, send them out to the client to sign. And once we have them back, we're then able to go to the ATO to request the establishment of the fund to obtain its ABN and TFN.
Okay. That's good to know. Just a question. You said something just before about it. I just want to ask, why would someone go out and set up a self-managed super fund? So you were asking about, you said something about retirement. So I know a lot of people talk about it. You're at the family barbecues, you're just talking to a person at the coffee shop. It seems like self-managed super fund is on everyone's radar. So just why do people come to you to open up a self-managed super fund?
Predominantly, it's either they've gone and seen a financial advisor and it's part of their strategy and wealth creation for retirement, as the SMSF allows for, I guess, more options that what you get from an industry or retail fund, specifically around buying property. The only way to buy property with your superannuation is to set up a self-managed super fund. So there's that angle. They've spoken to the advisor. There's others that are business owners and they're currently either renting a commercial property or they are thinking about expanding their business and they need a commercial property, and they might not have the capacity to borrow personally, but they could utilize their superannuation savings to do that. So it varies how they come across to us. It just depends on what they're trying to achieve. But the most important thing is to make sure that they know what they're doing, and if they're not too sure, to seek guidance from their advisors.
Yeah, so like you said, you need your financial planner, so you need your team practically to help you and give you the right advice. So I know no one's going to go open up a self-managed super fund without a particular purpose or reason, so they've got to have that before they do anything. They need their priorities set straight. Just on that as well, another question I wanted to ask, and I'm sure the viewers and listeners want to hear about it. So it's a wealth creation technique as well. So people can open up a self-managed super fund, like you said, some business owners to kind of borrow that property if their borrowing capacity is max in their personal situation. And I'm sure you got to go through the right avenues to check that. Is that becoming more of a common thing that you're seeing day to day, especially in the last 2 to 3 years?
Property with SMSF has always been kind of strong. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm someone that likes property over shares. So depending on the client's requirements, people that love property will use this avenue to obtain more property.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, got to fit in with their strategy. So everyone's got a different strategy and different requirements that they want and goals. So most people are coming for SMSFs, I guess, for the property aspect of it.
Okay.
Interesting.
The biggest question is, how long does it take to actually open up a self-managed super fund? So say the client's gone through their strategy, they got what they need done correctly. Now they come to you, I want to open my self-managed super fund, George. Where did I start? How long does it take? What's the first thing that you would advise someone to do?
So we say between 2 to 6 weeks. The process is that you'd fill out the form for requesting your SMSF establishment. Once we get that back, we would send the documents out to the client to sign. Whether they want to come into the office, they can come into the office as well and sign them. Once they're signed, we apply to the ATO to register the SMSF. And so it's up to the ATO at that point in time to look through the process, the application form, and then approve the SMSF. It's important to note that if someone is applying for an SMSF and they've got outstanding matters with the ATO, so for example, they haven't lodged their prior year returns and they're overdue, or they owe the money to the ATO and they're delayed on their payments, it will put a hurdle in place where the SMSF might not get approved until all that's sorted. So it's very important when clients are coming to me, they're saying, make sure your ATO requirements, your personal tax, any business accounts that you've got with them that you're lodging accounts for are up to date. Otherwise, they'll put it on pause until you clean it up and then they'll approve your SMSF. And the reason for that is, yes, the ATO is pretty much saying, if we're going to let you set up a self-managed super fund, we want to make sure that you're up to date with all your tax requirements. And essentially, when you have an accountant take care of that for you, there's something less to worry about.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, you mentioned the tax requirements. Are there specific tax requirements that they need to understand or know about before setting up an SMSF, or will you kind of guide them through that process?
So I think before they set up an SMSF, if they're using an advisor, the advisor will explain that to them. If they're not using an advisor, the questions can vary. So it depends on what the client's asking. But what we would run through is explain to them the tax consequences of investing in an SMSF. And by that, I mean, if you are in accumulation phases, which is when you're building your wealth in a super fund, income is taxed at 15%. And then capital gains are taxed at 15% in the first 12 months. After the first 12 months, income is discounted by a third. So the effective tax rate on capital gains is 10%. So property being an asset that you don't usually buy and sell within the same year, you're holding for the longer term, you could effectively, before retirement, pay 10% of the capital gain versus, in your personal world, could max out sort of 46 cents in the dollar. But then when you go into retirement phase, which for most people is 60 years old, and you start a pension in your superannuation fund, the tax rate goes down to 0 for balances under 1.9 million. So let's say you bought a property for 500 grand. By the time you retire, it's worth 1.5. You can essentially sell that property in your super fund and pay 0% tax.
Yeah, wow. That's
Like
definitely
that.
an amazing benefit. Yeah.
That's good.
And I think that's probably a tax benefit that a lot of people are unaware of, is that if you sell that property in your SMSF in your retirement phase, you'll pay no capital gains.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, there are some caps to be mindful of.
Yeah.
We have those discussions with clients so they can understand their situation. It's very different from someone that's got, say, $300,000 in an SMSF versus someone that might have $4 million in there.
Yeah, okay. But you said the cap was somewhere around 9 million? Is that what you said?
No, the cap is 1.9.
1.9. Sorry, I misheard that
Per
one.
member. It's per member. So essentially, you're getting close to sort of 3.8 million between a mum and dad in an SMSF.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I guess a lot of people would be opening it as a couple, right? SMSF.
I have a lot of people ask me all the time that I've read something online, there was an article in newspaper, all this kind of stuff about self-managed super fund. There's so much information out there. I just feel like the last 5 years, I've never heard so much information about self-managed super fund in my life. So I know it's been around for a while. I know banks have their restrictions. People have their restrictions. They need to know what they're getting themselves into. You've been in the game for a long time. Have you seen any trends of people opening up in the recent years? Have you seen people kind of prefer it more or less? Is it more of a riskier stage this day and age, you would say?
I think it goes in cycles, just like the share market. So does the property market as well. Like at the moment on the news, it's like Melbourne is sort of like going downwards as opposed to the rest of the country is going up. So I think it's important that people that are thinking about an SMSF and thinking about property in an SMSF, it's to speak to the right, I guess, property investment experts to guide them where to be buying property. If they're not too sure, that's key. But in terms of the last 18 years, it just changed. Depends on the client, what they want to invest in. That depicts where their money goes in the SMSF.
Yeah. Have you, over the last 18 years, have you seen a noticeable change in, how many people are wanting to set up an SMSF?
It's definitely increasing. The younger generation wants to take control of their money. Yeah. Australia's love for property has obviously boomed the SMSF space.
Mm-hmm.
The negatives on that, there's some coming out saying, oh, there's all these SMSFs buying property, which makes a housing shortage for other people. But at the end of the day, the market's open to everyone, and if it's in the right thing to do for them, their investment strategy, right?
Yeah, definitely. Can you tell us a little bit about the different ways that people can buy property through an SMSF?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that you can buy property. Probably the two simplest ways to buy property is you set up the SMSF, you have enough cash in your SMSF to buy the property outright. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most simplest form of purchase. You can also borrow to buy property in the SMSF. So if your money is with an industry retail fund, you can't borrow in those funds. You can't invest in direct property. So if you wanted to set up an SMSF, you could borrow to buy the property. And then essentially what happens is you rent out that property, the rental income goes into the SMSF, and the SMSF then pays the loan. So as you would know, it's important to speak with a broker, see how much you can borrow before setting up an SMSF, working out all your numbers, speaking to your advisors, and making sure that it all lines up. And the key to that is if you are going to borrow to buy an SMSF, if you are going to buy property in an SMSF, that you set up the SMSF first. I've had clients in the past that have come to me and said to me, I've gone to an auction on the weekend and I've bought a property and I've paid the deposit personally. It's a separate structure to your personal world. Yeah. So the deposit has to be paid from the SMSF. The loan has to be from the SMSF. You've got to do it all in the right order. So that's why it's key to speak to the experts in the field first, understand what's required, and the process. You can also borrow. You can also buy property in SMSF from other people. So you can buy tenants in common. Mm-hmm. Tier lenders will actually allow two SMSFs to borrow to buy the same property.
Okay, interesting.
You also buy property through a unit trust, which is then owned by the SMSF. There's multiple ways, and they all depend on the client's needs and what's best for them.
Yeah. Maybe a question for you, Daniel, just thinking about like the borrowing to buy property in your SMSF, but are there any specific things that lenders look at when you're trying to look at your borrowing capacity for an SMSF? Because it's obviously not as simple as here's my income, here's my expenses. It's a bit different, right? Yeah,
well, first of all, they look at it as if it's its own standalone asset. So they look at the contributions that you'll be making towards the property and also what the property will be generating. Because it is for investment purposes only. That's why you create this. One of the key things about when you're buying something, obviously you need your strategy and you need to have your purpose. You can't have a construction loan in your self-managed super fund. Mm-hmm. You can't just go buy any property that just you want to buy. There are certain properties that you need to buy for your self-managed super fund. So that's one key thing to take away from that. But also, they're not going to look at all your, like some people don't put in their personal name. It's in its own entity. So they're not going to look at all your credit cards, all your car loans, your 7 properties that you have, or your 1 property that you have. Mm-hmm. It's its own standalone asset. They assess the income and the contributions made to that property, and then they give you the outcome from there, and the banks will give you kind of value of a round figure. You can borrow this much, you need this much money to complete, and you take it from there. You will still pay stamp duty, you'll still pay your normal fees and charges that you want as a normal purchase. Yeah. It's just that standalone entity is its own pretty much income producing asset.
Okay, and if they were to, I guess, then borrow to buy their own house separate to the SMSF, would the loan that they have against their SMSF impact that, or is it treated completely separate?
Completely separate entity, separate people. So you just look at it as if me and you're buying a house. Yeah. That's how you would look at buying a self-managed super fund. So I have my own personal property. Yeah. Buying a self-managed super fund. 2 separate people. That's exactly what a self-managed super fund loan, and so the finance people look at it that way as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It's pretty cool. It's a nice little trick if you know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
It can be rewarding. Again, like people may open up for the wrong reasons. Again, someone who's only got 150 or 180k may not understand that you need a little bit more.
Yeah.
But one of the key questions that I get a lot is, I have 5, 6, 7 supers all around the place. How do I roll them over, put them all into the self-managed super fund? Do you get that a lot, George?
Yeah, we do. And it's not that hard to do, but you just got to be aware of the consequences of doing that, especially if you've got insurance held in those super funds. A lot of people don't realize that if you do roll out of an industry retail fund and there's insurance attached to it, once you roll that money away from that super fund, the insurance will cease. So we're always saying to clients, make sure you're speaking to your advisors, especially around insurance, to make sure whether you keep that insurance going, and that might be by leaving a small amount of money in that super fund to keep paying for it, or if it's not worth keeping and you've got too many insurances all over the place, consolidating them into one.
Okay, interesting. Another one for you, Daniel, while we're on property and SMSF. From your perspective, is there a specific property type or property types that would be more suited to invest in for SMSF?
Personally, I don't have a preference. What I advise people who are in their retirement phase is try and get something that's close to connected suburbs. I like that. In terms of property type, the banks have their restrictions if it's an apartment, townhouse, or house. And again, your budget. It will kind of relies on your budget.
Yeah.
But we've seen how the property market's grown.
Yeah.
So if it's up to me and I'm advising someone for their retirement, I'm going to give the same approach as we do common sense investing. If you're in a connected suburb, you're next to a Woolies, Bunnings, State School, it's going to work regardless. And if you have enough budget to buy property A, great. You always have property B ready just in case you can't afford property A.
Yeah.
But either or, you can't really complain as long as it matches your goals for your retirement, then you're fine.
I was about to say, so pretty much the same as any property investment, as long as it's purchased
Clear
to
purpose.
achieve a specific goal,
Yeah.
then okay, perfect, no problem. One question actually that I've been asked a lot, and I actually don't know the answer, and I don't know which one of you will have the answer, but I've heard a lot, especially with house and land contracts, that you need a 1-part contract for SMSF.
Yep.
Can either of you tell me why and what that means, really?
Essentially, if you're borrowing to buy a property in a self-managed super fund, the rules around borrowing are restricted to one asset per loan. In summary, so what that means is that if you're going to borrow, say, $500,000 to buy an off-the-plan purchase, there has to be a contract in place that is essentially saying there's the land portion and there's the build portion. And that is acceptable. But also, if there is, for example, that was for an apartment and there was a car park attached to the apartment, the ATO will accept that is also okay because that car park is attached to that apartment.
Yeah.
So what that means is you can't borrow from the bank to build a house and then borrow again to build a townhouse at the back of that house.
Okay. So as long as it's for the one asset, then
One asset, one loan, one contract.
Makes sense.
That makes
That's a
sense.
good explanation.
yeah. Are there any other benefits to it being a 1-part contract? Is it, a smoother process or anything like that?
Well, the most common thing is the buyer is safe because they're only paying when the actual asset's completed. So they don't have to worry about it. So their super is there for their retirement. So you want no risk, as little risks as possible when you're buying your super.
Yeah.
So when you are purchasing an off-the-plan purchase and you're doing construction, obviously the bank values it, looks at it, make sure it's all okay. There's your parameters and your restrictions around that. If something that's 1 part or it's completed, your self-managed super fund or your finance company will not release the money until they can see the asset is in lockup stage and you can get the keys and the tenant can move in. So it's quite safe, I would say. Just same feedback on that, George?
It's probably important to mention though as well with SMSFs. Let's say the SMSF bought a block of land, it cannot borrow to build on the block of land. It can buy a block of land and then use money that it has to build a house on there. So for anyone looking to buy an off-the-plan purchase, like a 1 contract, like you mentioned before, so for a new home, it has to be done that way. They have to buy it as a package. They can't borrow to buy the land and then borrow to build.
Okay. So otherwise they'd have to have enough cash in their SMSF to fund the build itself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. also probably a question for you, Daniel, but how can people make the most of, I guess, investing in property with their SMSF, and what can they do over time to make sure it's performing at its best?
Yeah, sure. So I will take the long-term game here. So I won't talk too much about like the area, because obviously the area is key, so we all know that. I guess it's more about when you're having your strategy that it's there for your retirement, you want to kind of be at that point where you're at your retirement, you can sell it, and then that will be giving you your income, or your income needed to kind of for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life when you're in the retirement phase. So I would say strongly, when you are considering something that's going to be a long-term hold, you don't want maintenance, you don't want headaches, you don't want that all this little kind of stuff, correct? So as close as possible as you can.
Yeah.
Give you that peace of mind, the warranties, the newer properties, it's easy to rent out, tenants, all that kind of stuff. So my one kind of key thing is to try and make as new as possible. Makes it so much easier for you as a long-term hold. And by that time, think about it, in 20 years time, because it's a retirement thing, when you are selling that compared to selling something that's a bit older, you're going to get it's going to be easy to sell. Hopefully you make a bit more money. Someone can buy that a bit quicker. So all the benefits to that kind of line up to your strategy. So I would kind of say as new as possible is the key there.
Okay. Interesting. While we're kind of on, I guess, the benefits, George, you spoke a little earlier about the tax benefits. Obviously, going from normal income is taxed around like that 46-ish % for normal income tax. You mentioned, I think SMSF is taxed at 15 and then 10% at different stages after you hold it for a certain period of time. And then if you're selling in the retirement phase, you'll pay no capital gains as long as you're under the $1.9 million cap. Are there any other tax benefits that come with buying new property that transfer also into SMSF? Like depreciation or anything like that?
The depreciation, any expense really that you can claim against the property. And as you know, new properties tend to have a high depreciation expense than something that's really old.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought you were going to say you have a little discount code to pay less tax. I was waiting for that.
I'm sure we all wish that we have a discount code to pay less tax. Okay, well that's good. Well, I'm not well educated on the SMSF space, so that's interesting to me to know that all of the normal investment tax benefits, I suppose, also roll into SMSF, as well as the added ones that you get only in your SMSF.
100%. And it is. I think we overcomplicate it sometimes. You're buying an asset for your retirement, you're buying it for your self-managed super fund for a clear-cut purpose. It's like buying a normal property. Just the same values apply, the same rules apply, the same common sense investing applies, I would say. It's just the type of asset you purchase and the way you're purchasing it is the only thing that really changes.
Yeah.
And obviously the regulations and compliance that goes around it.
Yeah.
So I would say just, again, the team will tell you how to do it, what you can do. And if you look online, there's going to be research that may make sense, may not make sense, and you try to juggle what's right, what's not right. Even myself, like I'm seeing SMSF everywhere.
Yeah.
So I asked you, George, the trends. I feel like everyone nowadays is just wanting to open up a self-managed super fund without the actual purpose of why they're opening it up, and they're leaving it there. They send up their supers and they're leaving it there, it rolled over for the next 6-12 months, and not doing anything with it because they don't know what to do next. Yeah,
definitely. I was actually looking at some stats, and I'm going to read them because I can't remember them. Just on that, you said a lot of people are opening SMSFs more and more. Currently, I just lost my document. So currently there is a total estimated asset in SMSF of around $932 billion.
Wow.
Which is insane. But I'm sure that it would be probably 10 times that in normal traditional super funds. So it's increasing definitely and going up year on year, but a lot of people are unaware that it's possible to do this.
Yeah.
So interesting one. Have you got a client story, George, that you can share where someone has opened a SMSF and maybe invested in property?
So we had a client who was renting an office, and he was fed up with his landlord not fixing things, putting up the rent, not allowing him to make small changes to, paint the walls or put things up and around. And he got fed up with it. So he ended up setting up an SMSF up and buying an office in the SMSF himself. So it was his own asset. He the tenancy. He was paying off his own asset. He was able to do whatever he wanted to that property without the hassles of a landlord trying to control it. And that is something that helps people. And he couldn't have done it personally because he had too much money tied up. So having an SMSF and superannuation balances was enough to allow him to get the loan, allowed him to do this.
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, that was a commercial property because I know with residential, obviously, if you buy a property with your SMSF, you cannot live in that property as well. Are the rules different for commercial spaces and obviously renting from a business entity rather than a personal?
So I'll give you a bit of background to this. If you own a residential property, you cannot sell it to your SMSF.
Yeah.
If you own a commercial property, you can sell it to your SMSF. And the idea behind that is to stop people from selling their holiday homes or their own home to an SMSF and then living in it and paying themselves rent. So you can buy any property, residential, as long as it's not from a related party. Yeah. But commercial properties on the other end of that, which you can do. So the key is if you do buy a residential property, you don't rent it out to related parties. You're not allowed to do that. So you can't buy something and then rent it out to your brother or sister or auntie. But you can rent it out to your friend because it's regarded as a related party. If you did buy a residential property and say it was down by the beach and you wanted to go stay there for a weekend, you're actually not allowed to do that because you can't have a present day entitlement to superannuation assets. You can, however, if you wanted to, and I've had some clients do this, they want to live at a certain beach area. They can't afford to buy that property right now. They've decided that their strategy is that I'm going to use my super to buy the house that I want to live in when I'm retired. And so they buy it with their super, they rent it out. If they're borrowing, they pay that mortgage off over the years. Let's say they come to retirement age, they've paid off the debt. They can then withdraw that property out of their SMSF and then live in it.
I guess so. In like a different strategy. So instead of selling that property and putting the money back in their SMSF, they withdrew it and kind of took that asset back into their personal name. So then they were able to live in it.
That's pretty cool.
Interesting. That's
a lot of things you can do with super. Too many things for the amount of time that we've got to discuss today.
Yeah.
That's why it's really important to actually understand what the client's goals are and what they want, and to educate them on what's allowed, so they can actually think about these options and assess it with their advisors to make the right choice.
That's definitely a really good one. I've never heard of that. Have you, Daniel?
Well, not like that, but I have a similar client story, success story. So I had middle-aged couple. They've been renting their whole life. They tried to buy a property. They tried to buy something, didn't work out the way. They lost the cash. Stuff happened. And when I was speaking to them, this was 5 years ago, almost now, 4.5, 5 years ago. And I'll never forget the conversation that took place. They were telling me that they would love the opportunity to buy property, but they have no savings, and I know the property market's going crazy at the moment.
Yeah.
So what we did, we sat down and like, okay, so what's the key plan? What do you guys want to do in the future? They were so worried that they're going to have to keep working until they're 70, 75. And maybe after that, there was no kind of plan next. Went to the advisor. I referred him to one of my our referral partners who can kind of help out there. Gave him a plan to obviously open up a self-managed super fund. Came back to me saying, Daniel, it looks like that we can purchase in our self-managed super fund. That's where our money is. Again, they have no savings, nothing like that, but they had the money in their self-managed super fund, or sorry, their normal super built up. They did the rollover. Took about 2.5 months. It was a bit of a longer process. Not too sure why, maybe multiple supers. Then we ended up getting them a property in Mango Hill. This was 4.5, 5 years ago. I'll never forget. It was $429 or $439, around that price.
Yeah.
Just recently, a year ago, they just wanted to get see how much it's worth, revalue it. It came up at $960K.
Wow.
So like
in how long?
In 4.5, 5 years. Their retirement is and they've still got another 12 years left of work minimum before they hit that retirement age. They can sell that and they've already doubled their money. Their assets doubled. So they can retire a bit more comfortable. They have a plan now, so they feel a bit more at ease. So people listening who may feel like it's impossible to get into the market, you may have another plan there if it's suitable and you know what your strategy is. So I think it's something to consider, and that story is etched in my brain forever, because even I went to my own parents and I said to them, okay, so you guys probably have the same kind of concept. You guys can look at purchasing your super, open a self-managed super fund, and have a retirement plan. Don't rely on anyone else when you get to that age. So no, it worked out very well for them. But yeah, there's key benefits to it if you can understand what it is you want. And I'm going to keep telling everyone that, like, if you know what you want and your advisor kind of gives you the tick and the go ahead, I feel like it's a great asset to get into and a great strategy to get into.
Definitely. I was going to ask you, Daniel, what your top tips would be for people looking to get into SMSF and investing in property, but you jumped me. All right, guys. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything we can in today's episode. Any final thoughts, any tips, tricks, any other client stories you want to share, George?
No, I think the key is to make sure you're speaking to your advisors and really understanding what SMSFs are. Is it right for you? Getting the right advice and guidance, then trying to do something without the help of people that know what they're doing, and then either buying the wrong property, or making mistakes and not doing it the right way with the setup, and then you've got to fix structures.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you.
This is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. For specific guidance on your situation, consulting a qualified financial professional is essential.